In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the NCOS API in a Cradlepoint SDK application. Hi, I'm Alex with Cradlepoint. SDK applications unlock a world of potential, allowing you to control and automate router features and configurations. If you want to automate or customize a router feature, you may be wondering, where do I start? In this video, you're going to learn how to find and work with features in the NCOS API in a Cradlepoint SDK application. We're going to cover the CLI, the REST API, and the DTD or schema of the configuration. First, it's good to know your way around the CLI of the router. SSH to the IP address of your router and log in with your admin credentials. Type ls-l to get a list of the folders available. The folder structure is fairly intuitive and it's pretty easy to find things. The main folders are config and status. Config is where you set the configuration for all the router features, and status tells you the current status of those features. The CLI uses standard methods of get, put, post, delete, etc. to read and write at the command line. Here are some examples of some useful paths at the command line. Under status/system, there's a number of useful fields such as CPU, memory, uptime, load average, and temperature. Also under status/system/SDK, you can see all the SDK applications and their current state. Also in the status tree is status/WAN/primary_device. And this will give you the current connected WAN interface. Status/LAN/clients will give you the MAC address and IP address of all the connected LAN clients. Status/WLAN/clients will give you the Wi-Fi analytics of all the connected Wi-Fi clients. All of the router configuration is under the config folder. Under config/system, there's some useful fields such as system_ID, which is the host name, DESC or description, and asset_ID. These three fields show up in the NCM devices grid, so an SDK app can put data here and it will sync to NCM and show up in the devices grid in NCM. And you can also retrieve that data from the router's endpoint in the NCM API. Here I can do a put to config/system/DESC or description, and then I can see that show up in NCM in the devices grid. This is a really useful way of getting data from your SDK app into NCM for visibility. Router configs also have a place to put SDK app data for use in your app. This is useful for letting users configure settings for your application. In the UI under System SDK Data, you can add named entries with up to 10 kilobytes of data in the value field. Then in your SDK app, you can get config/system/SDK/app data and get all the values to work with. Using GPS as an example, first you would enable the GPS by writing to the configuration in the config tree. Then you would get the latitude and longitude from the status tree. You can type help at the CLI to get a list of all the available commands. And you can also type help space a command name to get specific details about that command. It's important to note that the paths and values are the same across the CLI, the REST API, and the SDK functions. This makes it easy to work across the different interfaces. Okay, now that we've looked at the CLI, let's check out how the REST API works on NCOS. Another great way to learn router features is to watch how the UI interacts with the API on the router. Note that all of the functionality in the UI uses the REST API in the backend. You can see how this works in Chrome by logging into the router and press F12 to get to the Dev Tools. Then click on the Network tab, and you can see all of the API calls made by the router when you click buttons in the UI. You can copy the paths and values and modify as necessary for use in your SDK application. Here you can see me copying the code to enable GPS. Pro tip, this is JSON output, and values of true and false need to be capitalized, and values of null need to be replaced with none to work with Python. Now in PyCharm, in our SDK app, we can do a CP put to the same path and values to enable GPS in our application. And then we can do fix equals cp.get status/GPS/fix. And then we can log that using cp.log. And then we can run our app and we can see it log the GPS information. Now that we've looked at the REST API, let's look at the document type definition, or DTD, or schema, of the configuration. You can see the schema by opening your browser and browse to the IP address of your router /API/DTD. You will want a JSON viewer extension to be able to read this. You can search in your browser for any topic like SDK, and you can find the schema for that section of the configuration. This will show the paths or nodes and the values and their data types. So there you have it. These methods should make it a lot easier to find features in NCOS API and work with them in your SDK applications. Check out the sample apps included in the SDK for more ideas to get you started. Also, check out our other developer videos and come chat with us in the developer forums at customer.cradlepoint.com. Thanks for watching.